welcome to this video on how to find that social optimum in externalities. You can actually apply these general principles to other things like monopolies. That comes later. I just want to tackle this in more depth. We've done it a little bit, but double checking, I think this is really important actually, especially if you want to understand that welfare loss triangle. Then again, it rolls over to year 13 stuff, so I think it's useful. Remember, we need to know all these definitions. So here I've got them written down. I've got social optimum, social welfare, marginal welfare, MSB, MSC. We need all of those today. If you want to find a social optimum, essentially we want to maximize welfare, and welfare is the difference between your benefits and your cost to society. And to work that out, if you've looked at the previous two videos, if not, take a look on the link. You want to really look at the MSB and the MSC curve, and that's going to be how we're going to work out the social optimum. Key rules, be sure to write these 3 rules down. If marginal social benefit exceeds marginal social cost, welfare increases. So it's good to produce this unit. Even if you only get like a 1 point extra benefit than cost, it's still good to produce it, because your welfare will increase. If MSB equals your MSC, your welfare is going to be constant. And if MSB is smaller than MSC, your welfare will actually be negative for that unit. What I wanted to say in that yellow bracket is like total welfare might not be negative, but just that one unit will be. So here I've got an illustration to help guide you through these ideas. Here we have MSB exceeding MSC, welfare will increase by producing that unit. So take a look at this particular unit. I mean, I've picked it kind of at random. I could pick any unit. So this Q1 doesn't have like any special importance attached to it, but at this particular random quantity, the benefit was 10 to society, but the cost was only 3. And that means that society has gained 10, lost 3, so therefore it's kept 7. And that's the welfare. This Q1 unit has added 7 to total welfare. So remember, if MSB exceeds MSC, welfare increases. That's actually still going to be true. Let me just delete these things. That's still going to be true even if you look at Q2. At Q2, the cost was only 5. The benefit was only, 7. So society's welfare increased by 2, which is still good to produce Q2 because welfare increases by 2. And in fact, producing Q2 is better than producing Q1 because Q2 will give you 2 more benefits onto what Q1 has already gained for you. I'll show you this in a table. So here I have this other graph, and I've got, again, the same thing, marginal social cost, marginal social benefits. I know your externality graphs can have more stuff in them, but we need to just only focus on these 2 curves and kind of ignore everything else when you're dealing with welfare impacts to society. So I've taken all the quantities, these little tiny quantities. I've taken 1 quantity, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They're quite small, so this graph is quite small. And I've put all those quantities into a table. And I've tracked all the benefits that all these quantities had. So for example, that first tiny unit had a benefit of 14, and that's what's in the table. And it had a cost, and I have a little red dot there. So in my table, it has a cost of 1. Then you look at quantity 2. Quantity 2 again has, in my table, a benefit of 13 and then a cost of 1.5. And that's all the information I've transferred to the table. I like working with the table. I think it makes it more clear what we're dealing with. And but you can also just show it as like these little lines. The lines is the net welfare impact, taking the MSB minus the MSC. So you can see that first unit adds 13 welfare. Why does it add 13 welfare? Because it had benefits higher than costs. That second unit adds 11.5 welfare. Why? Because it added 13 benefits and only cost 1.5. So remember that rule that we had? If MSB exceeds MSC, welfare increases. We see MSB being higher than MSC for all of these units. All of them had more benefits than costs. And you can see welfare just kept increasing and increasing and increasing and increasing. And it's the highest welfare so far at Q1. But we know that if you produced more units, these units are good because they all had more benefits than cost. So welfare would have been even higher. So that's that first rule. The second rule, if you produce where MSB equals MSC, welfare is going to be constant for that, like one unit. That one unit will just have a neutral impact on welfare. So take a look at this other quantity here, Q2. This particular Q2, your MSC equals your MSB. I've put some numbers here. Marginal social cost is 5, so this unit added 5 to cost to society, but it added 5 benefits to society, meaning overall that this Q2 third unit or this Q2 second unit, whatever, this particular unit had a neutral impact on welfare. There is no more welfare that is gained. That doesn't say that previous units have also had no impact, right? We know that all of these units here were actually really good because all of these units here had way more benefits. See, all these had really high benefits compared to their corresponding costs. So if you produce at Q2 where MSC equals MSB, that Q2 third unit or second unit doesn't add anything to welfare. But take a look at the previous units because those previous units could have. And that's kind of what's going to make this really interesting today. So here's the kind of takeaway. Even though no welfare is added by producing Q2, it's actually best to produce at Q2 because you've gained all the previous welfare gains where MSB was higher than MSC. And here's kind of that chart kind of proving that to you. Got the same info. If you decided to produce Q2, and that means not just the Q2 like second unit. If you want to produce 5 units, you don't just produce the 5th, right? You produce like the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th. So if you want to produce the 5th unit, you have to produce 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And all of these 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, all of these had benefits higher than costs. So all of these had positive marginal welfares. You can see on that table there, that first unit had a benefit of 9, a cost of 1, adding 8 to welfare. That second unit added 6 to welfare, bringing the total higher, 6 higher than before to become 14. That third unit added another 4, bringing that total up to 18, giving you the highest possible welfare at this Q2 location. And that is why, even though Q2 doesn't actually add any more welfare itself, like that unit, because all the previous ones have, because all the previous ones had MSB higher than MSC, Q2 is actually the smartest place to produce. You get the highest total welfare. Right, so what would happen if you continue with this? What happens if you said, hey, well, everything's been going so good so far. So far, all the MSBs have been higher than the MSC. What happens if I produce a little bit more? What if I produce at Q3? But watch out, because Q3 isn't the same. Q3, totally different game. Q3, you have now the costs higher than the benefits. Q3 has an MSC of 7 and an MSB of 3. And this is bad news because adding 7 to costs and 3 to benefits is going to make you a net welfare loss. That Q3 third unit or third unit is actually like decreasing your welfare by -4. So you're 4 points like worse off compared to what you were before. And that's not good. You don't want to be producing Q3, right? You're harming welfare, and you don't really want to be producing anywhere where your costs are higher than your benefits for that unit, right? You want to be avoiding all these units. If for whatever reason you found yourself there, you really don't want to be doing that. Welfare decreases by producing all the units that have MSB less than MSC. Yeah, welfare decreases for all the units having MSB less than MSC. So to prove this, guess what I've done? I have a chart here, same chart, by the way. It's got more numbers because on one hand I wanted to prove this to you, and yeah. So I've tracked all the quantities from 1 to 7, and I've tracked the marginal social benefits that each of these had. Those are in blue on the table. And I've tracked all the marginal social costs that all these units had. If you want to try this yourself, you should be able to kind of line this up also yourself really carefully. If you do that, you will find that that first unit, as we've talked about before, added 9 to benefits and 1 to cost. So overall has an additional welfare impact of 8. Adds 8 welfare, bringing the total to 8. But that second unit that added 6 brings the total welfare to 14. That's because the MSB was higher than the MSC. Now, if you keep going and you find yourself at quantity 5, quantity 5 was that really cool one where marginal costs equaled marginal benefits. And that meant that your total welfare added nothing, right? That was like the really cool one that we were talking about here. Added nothing to total welfare. But that didn't mean that your total welfare was 0. That means your total welfare is 22 actually, because you've had all the previous units that had benefits higher than costs, all of them kind of successively adding to welfare. Meaning that welfare was maximized at quantity 5. You definitely don't want to produce more than quantity 5, because if you step towards 6 or 7, you have costs higher than the benefits, meaning that that 6th unit is actually reducing welfare by 2, bringing your total back down to 20. That 7th unit reduces welfare by 4, bringing your total back down to 16. And then you're just going to wish you never produced 6 or 7 and you're back at 5. So the conclusion is the social optimum is where social welfare is maximized. And that's in our example Q5, but you can find it where your MSB equals your MSC. This is the social optimum quantity. Anything less than this, even though it looks good, maybe your benefits are higher than your costs, is actually not the best outcome because you've neglected to gain all that welfare. And anything more than that quantity is bad because it's going to have social costs higher than social benefits. Stay tuned for the next video. We're going to keep going, keep going in this series. It's been somewhat long, but it's also building you up, I think, really well to be able to talk about this in detail in your essays and work on this thing that we'll get to these welfare losses really soon. Okay, so take care, see you soon, thank you so much, bye!